All right. Hello, my friends. 同志们,大家好. Welcome back to part 2 of Seize Power, the next installment in the power seizures of 1967. I'm your host, Drew Smith, hitting you back up once again from the northwest city of Xi'an, formerly the ancient Han and Tang capital of Chang'an. And now you guys know I usually like to spend the first 5 minutes of my podcast catching you guys up on my exciting life here in China, but this episode is a little different. Today, I want to cut to the chase, so I'm not entirely talking over my 3 wonderful guests. So today, we're having a roundtable panel discussion for this episode. And here today, I have 3 guests. Dr. Hong Dongping, professor at Warren-Wilson College in North Carolina. And we have runs the wonderful GPCR Visuals Archive on Twitter and is a history major himself working in Chinese history, and independent cultural revolution scholar Alan Jordan, who I have enjoyed corresponding with over the past year as I've been building my podcast. So let's all go around and introduce ourselves and tell you guys, you guys tell the studio audience who you are. Dongping, would you like to start?
Okay. My name is Dongping Han, and I'm professor of history and political science at Warren-Wilson College. And I wrote a book called The Unknown Cultural Revolution, and talking about the Cultural Revolution in the countryside in Shandong rural area. So I published a few articles and give a few lectures on the Cultural Revolution and its accomplishment.
Got it. Refresh my memory. Did you write any other monographs about the Cultural Revolution?
Quite a few.
Okay.
I wrote one called The Educational Reform and Its Impact on the Chinese Rural Development. And
okay.
I wrote another, I think, paper is on hukou system.
Mm-hmm.
And its impact on the Chinese rural development. And I wrote about Mao and Cultural Revolution, Gritty Forward, and like that. Yeah.
Great. All right, Alan, how about you introduce yourself?
I'm Alan Jordan. I am a history major, and I've been a lifelong enthusiast of history. However, this is largely a passion project for me, and I've been studying the Cultural Revolution for going over 10 years now. I have written a handful of short essays on the subject, and I think just a disclaimer, I'm not actually a China scholar or focused on particularly Maoist China, but rather how it fits in with the historical communist sequence as a whole, stretching in my periodization from the birth of the Shanghai Commune in 1871 to the death of Mao Zedong in 1976. So I really kind of entered into this subject sideways because I had a wonderful Chinese history professor in undergrad, and it really made a huge impact and kind of brought Maoism, Mao, and the legacy of the Chinese Revolution onto my radar. So I've kind of been with it ever since.
Fantastic. And finally, last but not least, introduce yourself, my friend.
My name is, and I'm a independent, also would consider myself an independent researcher before I further into my studies in college. But I'm a history major in college currently, and my last semester paper was written on the Cultural Revolution. Currently, right now, I've been doing a lot of research. I've actually just conducted a couple interviews with Dr. Han and Dr. Mobile Gao of Adelaide University. They're the Battle for China's Past. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm glad to be with such distinguished individuals of history and people with such knowledge and history of the Chinese Revolution. because for me, I see it as an event that was really earth-shaking in human history. You see the fact that this country of 600 million people at the time the communists seized power were able to increase the population, living standard, and all these things. The class struggle at the helm for the 27 years Chairman Mao was alive. I think it's very inspiring for the future of humanity, especially because you see it in tandem compared, working with and being able to criticize other forms of, communism and the regression of communism back into capitalism, like in the Eastern Bloc and all these things. I think it's really important for our future revolutionary movement to know how exactly the Chinese experience went and how exactly what we can learn from the Chinese experience.
Absolutely. As you know, and as our audience knows, I used to be in the youth league of the Revolutionary Communist Party, which was part of the Revolutionary Internationalist movement, and they always emphasized that the Cultural Revolution was the furthest we've gotten so far to communism, and I still share that sentiment a good bit. So, all right, so we've all introduced ourselves and, said where exactly we stand. So, again, we're talking today about the second part of the power seizures after the January storm and the commune system, obviously not the People's Commune collective farms of 1949 to 1979, We're talking the Shanghai People's Commune mainly, and then to a lesser extent, we'll talk about the Harbin Commune, and to an even lesser extent, the Beijing Commune. Then we'll start talking about the simultaneous rise of the 3-in-1 revolutionary committees that very quickly eclipsed the commune system. During February, we had the establishment of the Heilongjiang, Shandong, Shanghai, and Guizhou revolutionary committees. And then, of course, there were some other municipal and county revolutionary committees that were set up across February. And now a lot of other stuff went on from February 5th to February 28th, but because we only have so much time and we only have so much time. We can only talk about the launch of the communes and the first 4 revolutionary committees. Are you guys okay with that?
Yes,
of course. Good.
All right. For some reason, it is saying just a quick thing. It's saying our remaining meeting time is only 10 minutes. So in 10 minutes, we might have to make another chat. And then when I go into Audacity, I will have to combine the two sounds together and we'll have to edit. So just a heads up that we'll have to take a pause in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So keep your guys' emails and direct messages open because we'll have to take a pause in 10 minutes to restart the Zoom meeting.
You know what Chairman Mao said? He said, without destruction, there can be no construction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So I guess we can start with the most important attempt at a commune, the Shanghai Commune. And let me set the stage. It's February 5th, 1967. The Shanghai Party Committee and Shanghai Municipal Government have been toppled. The Revolutionary Rebel Workers HQ and a citywide coalition of all but 1 or 2 Red Guard factions are now basically in charge and have been in de facto power for about a month now. Zhang Chongchao is now de facto city leader. And so, guys, tell us what happens next. I'm always the one to tell the story, but let's have someone else tell the story of the 2 weeks that shook China. Alan, can you tell us the story of the Shanghai Commune from the 5th to 24th of February before our break?
Absolutely. So compared to the sequence of events leading up to the commune that Drew has enumerated in the previous episode, the month that the commune existed was a relatively subdued affair and largely a transitional state to what would become a more solidified form of revolutionary organization known as the Revolutionary Committee. But before that, there was kind of an intense series of events and behind the scenes negotiations to kind of trying to suss out the meaning of the commune and what direction it was going to go into. So on February 5th, there is a mass rally in Shanghai declaring that the commune is now established, which is really the symbolic climax of its appearance and coming. The nameplate at this rally of the Shanghai Municipal Party Committee is burned and replaced with the plate of the Shanghai People's Commune. And over 30 groups constituted the commune, some of which Drew has already mentioned. Obviously, the first and foremost among this organization is the Workers' General Headquarters, which is an alliance of radical worker factions. There is also a number of student groups, but there are also two other worker organizations which have rather long names. There's the Frontline to Grasp Revolution and Promote Production, which is an agency of the WGHQ. And then there is the Shanghai Mao Zedong Thought Workers Revolutionary Rebel Headquarters, which is a temp workers association. In the commune, to talk a little bit about it, it's like central organization. There's a 19-person provisional committee. There are 5 leaders from the Workers' General Headquarters, which is the largest proportion of the delegates present. There are 3 leaders from the Writers Group, which is a cadre group within the propaganda department, I believe, tied to Zhang Chunchao. And the rest are an assortment of Red Guard and other kinds of mass organizations. It's a little bit complicated because at this time, about half the city rebels were not formally integrated into the commune at the time, and some tried to call for like a second People's Commune, but they kind of end up either losing that contest or end up kind of jumping on board. So immediately they set out with the first ordinance to get the situation under control after the disintegration of the Shanghai Party Committee and the government, the economic situation. They are able to repress counter-revolutionary currents with the help of the People's Liberation Army and the security apparatus, which, just a little side note, unlike the Paris Commune, the Shanghai Commune is a little bit different because it still had the backing of a powerful centralized socialist state with a military and security apparatus, which the communards did not have. The communards were on their own. But some strange kind of stuff happens because there's no news in the national press for 2 weeks regarding the commune itself. Whereas
exactly, that's very
January, the January storm was extolled, in very bright letters. There's no immediate reaction from Beijing, and on February 12th, Mao summons Zhang Chunchao and Yao Wenyuan, the leading radicals in Shanghai and the heads of the commune, to a series of 3 meetings, which they kind of discuss and negotiate the future, the meaning of the commune. Mao makes some objections because he's concerned that while it's necessary to promote students and workers to positions of political power, he's concerned that without sufficient administrative experience, the situation will deteriorate. And he also is concerned to preserve a nucleus of political organization, which he, in some sense, is concerned the Shanghai Commune is not going to be able to provide. So about 1 week after the 18th, Beijing officially bans the use of the term commune in naming new power organs at the national and local levels. Basically, only the center is going to have authority to ratify new political organs. And by February 24th, the commune is dissolved. It is replaced by the Shanghai Revolutionary Committee, and kind of modeled after the first Revolutionary Committee already established in Heilongjiang. And this is organized along the 3-in-1 combination, or the Sanjihe, mentioned for the first time on the People's Daily in February 10th. So these are meant to be provisional organs, And really, it's the most important change in the Chinese state to emerge during the Cultural Revolution. And so the Shanghai Commune is while it's kind of a grand climax, one of many climaxes, it's also really a period of transition to what will become a more solidified post-revolutionary construction.
Wow. Excellent rundown, Alan. Pretty good description of the basics of the Shanghai Commune. We're coming up to our break here in a few seconds, and then I will restart the chat since it's now at 1 minute and 50 seconds. Oh, the fun things of technology. But once we get back from our break, then I'm going to open up the floor to everyone to talk about let's break down and dig into what exactly went on behind the scenes and the why the Shanghai Commune dissolved so quickly. Sound good, guys?
Yes.
All right.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right. Everybody keep your DMs and emails accounts open, and I will send the second link for part 2. All right. Let's take 5.
All right.
All right. We'll be right back after these messages. And we are back. So, before the break, we had Alan tell us a brief overview of the story of the Shanghai Commune, and now let's get on to the analysis. So Dr. Han, what's your take on the Shanghai Commune and where it stands in the broader history of the Cultural Revolution?
I think the name itself is not that important, and I think the what's whether it's called people's commune, what kind of commune or revolutionary community, that's the name. It's not that important, but what materialized under the name is more important. In most common people's thinking, and communism is very, very far away. It's something, it's only ideal, it's impossible, right? In real life. After teaching in the US about the Chinese Cultural Revolution, I feel actually what's going on in China at the time, it was a kind of communist society. Because community, what is communism? It's community, right? Began to manage the community life. And the power of state was greatly reduced. I was mentioned to you before, I wrote an article, a chapter about the Cultural Revolution police power. Right? The police power is no longer in the hands of the police. The police power was in the hands of the community. It's the people decide whether something was a crime or not. The workers, the farmers decide whether a crime is a crime. That's very important. I think most people think communism had to be very economically advanced. You don't have to be, right? At the time in Shanghai, the workers are managing their own affairs. The factories and at the factory level, the workers are running the factory. right? What is it
Mhm.
called, commune or revolution committee? It's not important. The important thing is how society was operating and how the workers, what's the role the workers play in the whole social, in the society. I think that's what we should keep in mind when we talk about the Cultural Revolution.
Got it. All right. So what's your take on the Shanghai Commune and like its place in the bigger narrative of the Cultural Revolution?
I think it's probably one of the most important events in the Cultural Revolution alongside the power seizure in Harbin, because you see rebels taking power and you also see they're supported by the CCRG, which goes to show that Mao himself and obviously Premier Zhou, and even though these two ended up becoming purged later for reasons that could be considered later, Chen Boda, Lin Biao, then obviously Yao Wenyuan, Zhang Chunxiao, Jiang Cheng, and other people. I think it's really important how you see an actual power seizure. You see that they overthrow the old leadership, but they also don't just set about abolishing it. They try to actually foster a new one. I believe Jiang Chunxiao talked about the Great Unity, or Mao talked about the Great Unity, but Jiang Chunxiao expressed the fact that factionalism and factions fighting each other would hurt the development of both the revolution, the Cultural Revolution, and the People's Republic of China, because one of the main goals was obviously to grasp production and promote revolution. You're seeing the fact that rebels are able to take power and seize power against the bureaucratic apparatus, but instead of what the bureaucrats would say, which is, oh, they'll just do nothing, they'll just be lazy, they'll just kind of sit around and abolish everything, you're seeing them take the state and you're seeing them take the machinery of the state in their own hands. Indeed. And I think that's important. And I think it is also a testament to the fact that I was talking to Professor Mobo Gao, and he was telling me actually that Shanghai was during the Cultural Revolution, one of the cities in China with always a large access to consumer goods, a higher standard of living. And he said part of that was because of the power seizure and that you were able to see the workers take control and such. So I think it's really important. And you see a lot of developments like with the People's Militia. You see that comes out of Shanghai. You see people like Wang Hongwen, like in the party center. You see that comes out of Shanghai, and as well a lot of like progressive literature.
Yeah, you guys might remember in my last episode saying how after the power seizures, after the January storm, it was then that Shanghai began to feel like the prosperous cosmopolitan city that it was known for being during the Republican era. So,
yes, and during the February countercurrent, like Ye Jianying, he was like, "Do you want people like Kwai Da-fu running the army and stuff?" But this kind of goes against that view, showing that when the rebels took power, things actually got better. It didn't just dissolve. And I think a lot of that is key because of Mao's intervention and the insistence of Zhang and Yao on the end of factionalism and on unity between different rebel groups. Because obviously there was tragedy in places like Guangxi. That was the worst case of factionalism in all of China, where you saw that tragedy. So the fact that you were able to see consolidation of worker power instead of just mindless factionalism and occurring between different factions, it's really important. And obviously the development after it.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's hop on to a part of the power seizures that a lot of people forget about. Everybody knows about the Shanghai Commune, but what about the Harbin Commune? I think it's personally worth really looking at. It's definitely slept on part of the January storm, in my opinion. So let me do the intro before I serve the ball. The Heilongjiang Revolutionary Committee gets founded on January 31st, but then a little over 2 weeks later, on the 16th of February, the capital of Heilongjiang, Harbin, sets up its own Shanghai-style commune, the Harbin People's Commune. And, of course, the Harbin Commune also got 86th 11 days later, just like the Shanghai Commune, and turned into a Harbin Revolutionary Committee. But, I think it's really interesting because people talk so much about the Shanghai Commune, but like other than like niche scholars like us, who really knows about the Harbin Commune? And do you guys think it's worth examining the Harbin Commune and how the commune style movement came about in places away from the major cities like Shanghai and Beijing? So how about Alan, do you want to start?
So my studies have not really brought me into deep detail with the Harbin Commune, but I think that it is important. Like other than the basics, which you've already stated, I do think it's important to talk about how important Shanghai was as a point of reference and as a sort of peak, and also a trendsetter within the Cultural Revolution. And so really, like, there's this, it's acting as this beacon, being this immense cosmopolitan city that's always been a haven for radical Chinese politics in the modern era. But the commune system is really tied, I think, to the earlier section of the mass phase, where there's this reactivation of the idea of the Paris Commune, which is interesting because it really harkens back to an era before Lenin and the Bolsheviks, before the October Socialist Revolution. And so it's really unique that all of these cities are suddenly throwing up mass movements that are trying to imitate something, or not imitate, but to reawaken, to reactivate in the midst of a completely different political situation, one in which a socialist state has already been achieved. They're reactivating this kind of primordial, like, communist experience, and that's heavily tied to a lot of the elements of the decision in 16 points, which lays out the commune as an ideal form of social organization. And so, like, I mean, I don't have a lot to say about the Harbin Commune itself, but I do think, like, it's important to note that there's this key relationship between many cities elsewhere in China, many cities and towns elsewhere in China, and the radical politics that are going on in Shanghai and the influence that Shanghai played for them. And then second of all, like, I think it's important to take note of this reactivation of this older, like, form of political organization, which appeared before Marxism-Leninism, but is in a sort of continuity with the socialist movements that would arise later in the 20th century. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm. All right. How about we go with, what's your take on the Harbin Commune? And, should we be examining it more, especially because, like I said, it was an attempt at a commune outside one of the major cities?
Yes, I do think it needs more recognition because it said the Harbin was a national model. In Rajapunk Farquhar's work, Mao's Last Revolution, it mentioned really quickly how during the power seizure in Harbin, it was viewed as a national model, and it was heralded in, I believe, Renmin Rebel. And I do think it's important. I do think it's really important to analyze that because not every city in China had the same material reality of Shanghai. Shanghai obviously had a high production capacity. It had a connection to the ocean. It had ports and such. And it also had a high standing in China from the Republican era, where it was very much a headquarters, a foreign capital, to the People's Republic era, where it was I believe 10 million strong city with a largely bureaucratic party apparatus, which was overthrown obviously by the Shanghai Commune. So we need to focus more on other cities. And I know in Harbin, the two leaders, Pan Fusheng and Wang Jiadao, both were actually aligned with the local PLA. And they ended up seizing power with rebels and such, and they were actually able to consolidate in order. And I believe Harbin was one of the cities when, during the 1976 coup, where the PLA was sent to, and its leadership was either dismissed or arrested, and mass swords were purged, obviously, as well as all across China. But I do think it's important to look because, as well, Harbin was a city close to the Soviet Union, so it could kind of show like a juxtaposition between Harbin, between this revolutionary model of the workers seizing power along with the army, and then across the border in maybe Vladivostok or another city in Siberia near the Amur River, you see like kind of like the bureaucratic Soviet model of, or like the Brezhnev model of kind of just like people sitting there and doing nothing, but the apparatchiks, rule for 20 years, then appoint their guy, then retire. So I do think it's really important. And I do think as well in Shenyang too, Mao Yuanxin and Chen Shilian, two people who were considered kind of on the radical wing of the CPC, also were able to seize power. So I do think there's a lot of importance in analyzing that stuff. And a final thing, actually, if you want, there are a lot of pictures of the Harbin Commune experience or the experience of the Revolutionary Committee. I forget the photographer's name, but I know it starts with Lee, and I believe it's a Z. His first name is. And there are a lot of interesting pictures. I can send them to you later. So, and it kind of, piqued a lot of interest because I know there was a bit of also contention in the leadership in 1971. But I would love to learn more about such a thing because cities like Harbin, cities like Shenyang are on like China's periphery, and when you think of China, you kind of only think of Beijing, Tianjin, Xi'an, Shanghai, obviously. So I do think there's a lot to learn.
Wonderful. All right, Dongping, what do you have to think about where the Harbin Commune sits in the historiography of the Cultural Revolution?
I didn't pay much attention to these names. I think what is important is what has been going on, what the workers, what the farmers are doing under their name. I think whether it's called a commune or revolution committee is the same for me.
So
it didn't have a significant fundamental difference. Only a name difference.
All right. So you basically feel the same way about the Harbin Commune as you do about Shanghai.
Yes.
Got it. All right. And now we'll look at our third commune. And that is, well, kind of the commune that wasn't. The commune that wasn't, and that is the Beijing Commune that Nie Wanze tried to start. So in mid-January, Nie Wanze and Kwai Du-fu declared they were going to seize power and create a Beijing Commune. And that being said, like I said in the last episode of the podcast, Nie and Kwai declared a Beijing Commune working group, I'm using air quotes here, that was going to be preparing a, once again, air quotes, representative assembly. But the Beijing Commune group was never part of the power seizures in Beijing in that month. When the Beijing Party Committee got seized by rebels, it was the Beijing Commune was not proclaimed. It just kind of fizzled out. So my question to you guys is this: would you guys consider that as a part of the wave of communes like Shanghai and Harbin? It seems to me many historians just chuck it to the side, like if they're even aware of the existence of the Beijing Commune, because it didn't seize power like the Shanghai and Harbin ones. Do you think that it's right to just ignore it, or do you think that there was more to the Beijing Commune? Let's start with my man.
If I'm correct, Nie Yuanzi and Kwai Du-fu kind of suffered from issues that I believe Zhang Chunqiao was talking about, and that was, it's a pretty famous story of like the 100-Day War at Tsinghua University, even though this was the year later.
We'll cover that. We will cover that
68,
very well.
68, and this is 67. But I think that students, which is what, Nie was a professor, but she had a large base of students, and so did Kwai. I think that, as Mao said, the working class must exercise influence or leadership in everything. I think that such a thing was a bit of a just them coordinating. I think it was a miscalculation on their part, and I think they should have coordinated with the Beijing Party Committee or the CCRG to kind of solve that, because I know they later had came under influence of a lot of erroneous action, and they were called they were two of the five little generals, even though they did good work. So I think that they kind of misstepped and kind of got ahead of themselves and kind of tried to apply a working class power seizure to kind of a student power seizure on the campus.
That's the feeling I got when I was reading my Google translation of the Beijing city archives annals, is that the Beijing Commune working group consisted solely of student Red Guards. There was no rebel workers. And I don't think that she went to the CCRG to talk it out or networked with the Shanghai. So the rebels in Shanghai. So makes sense that it would fall flat on the ground. Alan, do you have any take on the Beijing Commune that wasn't?
I pretty much agree with position on this. I do think that, like you said, there's like you, Drew, said, so there's kind of a debate as to whether it was part or wasn't. I mean, I'm going to take the cheap road and say it kind of occupies the space in between, where it's just kind of teetering on the fence. It was clearly kind of the initiative of a few Red Guard leaders and their immediate organizations, without the same sort of popular upsurge that propelled Harbin and Shanghai into the commune form. And so it's hard to say in what sense it should be understood, except I do think that there's a good point of investigation for scholars at the GPCR as to the mechanisms at play in that sort of overstepping of these kind of notorious Red Guard leaders. But I understand also that the situation was different in Beijing from, for example, Shanghai, because it was the base of the party center.
Yeah, it's the capital.
Yeah, and like Mao, before the mass phase of the Cultural Revolution truly began, made sure to create like a strong security apparatus in the town by deploying an elite division of the PLA, as well as securing heavily armed police in order to make sure that there couldn't be a sort of coup d'etat or an armed challenge to the Cultural Revolutionary program that he kind of rightly suspected and feared. So for some Red Guard leaders, as significant on the national stage as they might be, to kind of go forth with this without the backing of a popular upsurge and without sort of liaison with the CCRG and the party center, it makes sense that it really would have fizzled. So I would say that obviously, like anything else in the Cultural Revolution, it's important to keep an eye on. It's important to learn more about it. But I think really the kind of main question is like, what are the mechanisms that led it to express itself in this way? And what are the shortcomings therein?
I see raised your hand.
Yep. So in Fractured Rebellion by Andrew Walder, he basically describes that the effort was doomed from the beginning because the organizing committee itself was in disarray. He said confusion reigned, and then he said the new split was unrelated to the factional divide of 66, which is mostly on class. And the opening wedge for this new split was the competition to seize power in state agencies between on the basis of factionalism among rebel groups. It wasn't really a class versus class thing. It was more so who wants the power and who wants to kind of seize it, and which led to what John was talking about, which was, he had a quote, I believe in 67 or 68, he said that rival factionalism hurts us from getting to the mountaintop, which is working class leadership. So you're seeing these you're seeing these student groups try and seize power together or try and seize power against each other without a mass base in the working class or the PLA. And it's kind of a recipe for disaster because party officials won't really take them seriously. And I know obviously it is right to rebel, but you have to consider the fact that to maintain power and so heads don't roll, you have to consolidate your position. And that's something that was only really able to happen when the Mao Zedong thought worker teams came in, which were led by the working class and the army. But these students were kind of in over their head. I know they did, though. They did, I believe, I don't know if directly, but Xi Benyu, who was part of the CCRG, did tell them, I guess you guys can take power. But one of actually his later political charges, which for his dismissal from the CCRG, was kind of stirring up factionalism. So maybe this is something that needs more analysis. But from what I can get, it was more so a bit of a factional rivalry and not really a class versus class thing. Because one of the main messages of or themes of Walder's book, I believe, is that a lot of the time the factions didn't fight with each other based on class or political. It was more so they fought over who could get power and who can lead.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Han, do you have anything to add about the Beijing Commune experience and its...
Yes. Chairman Mao made a comment at the time. He said the students are not the producers. He referred to the workers and farmers were not involved in their movement. And he stressed the students need to integrate with the workers and the farmers. I think you look at it, if you compare Shanghai and many other places, is the workers played the major leadership role in the revolution. And in Beijing, it's mostly college students. And they are very, very inexperienced. They don't have lives. They don't have a lot of they don't see the big picture. And I think their shortcomings as a class was already revealed very, very quickly. They cannot be leaders.
Yeah, I think we all agree that that's why the Beijing Commune, didn't even materialize. Okay, so we've covered the three main communes: Shanghai, Harbin, and Beijing. Now I want to throw out a hardball question to you guys. So there's a few scholars out there, mainly French post-Maoist intellectual Alain Badiou, and then Wu Yiqing, who wrote a pretty good book. I disagree with its conclusions, but he wrote a book called The Cultural Revolutions in the Margins, Chinese Socialism in Crisis. Dongping, have you read this yet?
I was one of the referees of the book, actually. I did look at his book.
Yeah.
I know him. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but they... I deeply respect both Badiou and Wu, but I also vociferously disagree with them. But more or less, they believe that Mao pulling the plug on the commune system and replacing it with the revolutionary committees was the beginning of the end of the Cultural Revolution. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here and throw that out. What do you guys think? Let's actually start with Dongping. What do you think about people like Wu and Badiou and their ideas?
I disagree with their conclusions as well. I think whether it's called a commune or a rotary committee is not that important.
Yeah.
And Mao's objective in the Cultural Revolution is to reform the older generation of the revolutionaries, right? To make sure they don't degenerate into exploiters or revisionists or capitalists. And that's his main objective. And also to shake up things a little bit, to promote younger generation into the leadership positions. And whether you call it commune or rotary committee, they serve the same purpose. I would argue Mao's culture succeeded in accomplish what Mao wanted to accomplish. Many people think Cultural Revolution failed. I disagree. It didn't fail. It's accomplished what Mao wanted to accomplish, and they shake up the Chinese politics and the Chinese society, and had to profoundly transform the Chinese people's mind. And the reason why China was able to do well in the last 40 years is partly because the Cultural Revolution transformed and trained 2 generations of young people.
All right, raise his hand, and I know is very partisanly against.
I love the party line.
Yeah,
I do think Wu.
Go ahead, man. Go off. Let yourself cook.
So I do think Wu and Walder, they do raise some interesting questions, and obviously the whole RIM, like magically the Cultural Revolution happened and magically everyone won and everything line, I think is kind of stagnant and wrong with modern scholarship. But I also do think the whole down with everything line that is pushed by people like Baidu, by Wu, this may be a bit of a kind of over-exaggeration of their line. But I do think there's a lot of wrong to it, because I think they assume the Communist Party to automatically be a reactionary force that was always wrong. And I think it comes from, I believe, their denunciations of Stalin, and they think that they kind of take this position that Stalin was automatically bureaucratic and such. So they think that Mao wanting to kind of bring in provincial order is kind of like what Stalin did in his power struggle against Trotsky and later the purges, which was kind of get his men in power, which I kind of disagree with that whole conception that that's what Stalin did. But that's not the point. The point is, the Revolutionary Committee system was able to consolidate with the army, the people, and the mass organizations and the party committees. It was able to consolidate a revolutionary order, which would, for the most part, take orders from Beijing, which obviously you shouldn't always just listen to Beijing 100% of the time. But when it was under the leadership of Mao, under the leadership of the CCRG, and then later the Politburo Standing Committee, which had a lot of seasoned Cultural Revolution vets and supporters of, I do think there was a good amount of, I think the centralization aspect of the Revolutionary Committee, I feel, is underlooked, because you're able to consolidate a revolutionary order. And for the most part, obviously in places like Guangxi, which I mentioned earlier, this came at a heavy cost and too many heads rolled for something that should ever be repeated there, which is factional infighting. But I do think it's important to have a revolutionary order be able to be swept across the whole country, because this may sound partisan for me to Mao. I think it's important that I think Mao had consistently the best line throughout the Cultural Revolution, which was seize power, then consolidate power, and then advance the socialist construction of China. Because obviously, during the Cultural Revolution and these factional struggles, you see a lot of good come out of it, but you also see the economy goes down a bit, which obviously, if you're building a strong socialist country, especially threatened by imperialism, it's hard to kind of have your economy go down when you're trying to make enough commodities, when you're trying to make enough weapons, when you're trying to produce enough for international trade, so you can obviously continue the social kind of pot of your country, which you can use to fund further projects. So I do think the whole consolidation of a revolutionary order is correct. I think as well, I think the party, especially during the Wuhan incident, I think they did not blink towards things like regional provocation. And I think if they remained a model in which there was less centralization and party committees had more power, it could have led to even more fighting. Because say a group like Sheng Wulian took power in Hunan, you could have seen large-scale civil war, which would obviously help no one. So I think the consolidation of a cultural revolutionary order is important, and the assimilation of the Red Guards and mass organizations into that leadership, as well as old cadre who may have made mistakes, but you don't need to get rid of everyone if they've made a couple mistakes, is what Mao stressed throughout his career. So I think it was a good model, and I think it did get the country on board with the Cultural Revolution model. I do think, though, that some stuff wasn't that good, like in the South in Guangxi. That's probably my biggest. That was probably the biggest.
And Shanxi got pretty bad here in Shanxi, it got pretty bad too.
Yeah, I do think that was a mistake, but I do think overall the consolidation of revolutionary committee order was important for the gains of the Cultural Revolution, because especially compared to the previous order.
All right. Well, we're coming up to about 6 minutes left. So let's finish off with Alan, and then let's all wrap things up with our final thoughts. So, Alan, what do you think about the Badiou and Wu hypothesis? And then after you say your piece, we'll all have our final closing thoughts.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay. So my computer froze. Okay. So obviously, as a couple of people here know, I'm influenced by Badiou. There are points of contention that I have with him. I also respect Wu as a scholar. I disagree with a lot of his conclusions. And I find some of his work to be, or his theoretical angles to be rather eclectic.
Definitely.
I'm a little bit more somber with respect to the revolutionary committee system, because I think when we look at like Shanghai, we can't necessarily infer what happened in Shanghai. We can't extrapolate to the rest of the country everywhere. A lot of the revolutionary committees that were formed over the course of 67 and into 68 ended up being heavily dominated by the People's Liberation Army, which was an outcome unwelcome to Mao, who always had basically argued that the party should control the gun and not the other way around. However, like I know with Shanghai, and there are many other examples. The working class really did gain a remarkable prominence that it had not had hitherto within the Shanghai Revolutionary Committee as it formed later and remained so up until the coup in 1976. As far as kind of Badiou's commentary on the Commune, I think I agree more with like Dongping Han. And kind of the name is not so important. And I also don't really sit very easily with the idea that the party should be done with, which is kind of a position that Badiou has kind of taken on and off kind of in his later years.
Yeah.
But I
Badiou
do
basically
think that
says
the party
that
state, as it was organized in the
sorry.
socialist states, had certain problems that prohibited the mass mobilization that the Cultural Revolution is such a significant example for, and for reasons that probably we won't be able to get into here, was part of the reason for some of the mistakes that occurred. Ultimately, though, I do see the revolutionary committees as something new. They were the most important creation. But I think towards the end, there was a very kind of slow devolution into what came after the revolution, which was not only a return to the status quo, but the beginnings of a sort of new form of state capitalism. And it's hard for me to sharply distinguish the latter phase of the Cultural Revolution, which what came after. I am sad to, but that's basically my provisional take on the matter as it stands.
Yeah, I think this is definitely we're coming up to only 2 minutes, but I think we all here agree that we're at this is still a part of historiography that is still developing, that we're still developing. We don't have the answers yet. Yes. Yes, Dongping, you can finish us off. Hello? Oh. I thought I heard him. I thought I heard Dongping say something. But yeah, I think we're basically at we still don't have the answers yet. And
Hello?
yes, hello, Dongping.
What's happening?
Can you not hear
we
us?
lost him.
Yeah, I think we
Okay.
lost, but that's okay because we only have 1 minute left. But let me say thank you all very much for coming and joining us for this roundtable discussion, man. We learned a lot, and I hope to have you guys back soon. All right, you guys have a good day. 再见. Hey, comrades. Just a quick postscript from your boy Drew. Just wanted to let you know I wanted to apologize for the various technical difficulties. This was my first time ever using the record option on Zoom, and it's also the first time I have ever incorporated a Zoom recording into Audacity. This is still very much a learning process for me, but I hope that the information was still very, very informative. I hope you guys learned a lot. Once again, thank you, Alan. Thank you, Dongping, for your wonderful contributions. Hope to have you guys back on in the future. And as for you, the dear listeners, just get ready for at the end of August for episode 9, when we will be discussing the February countercurrent and the rise of the People's Liberation Army onto the scene of the Cultural Revolution narrative across February and March of 67. So be sure to look out for that. And until then, 再见!